Hi, my name is Sara Smith, and I'm 25 years old. Growing up, I always believed my life was perfect, or at least close enough. I had loving parents, supportive friends, and dreams that seemed reachable. My father, Thomas, a successful businessman, often told me, "Sara, you're stronger than you think, and your hard work will always pay off." My mother, Margaret, showered me with care, always making me feel that no matter what, I was loved and protected. School and college were my world. I worked hard, earned top grades, and everyone admired my determination. I thought I had friends I could trust with my life. But sometimes life has a cruel way of showing you who you really are and who around you is a traitor. It all started in my final year of college. My best friend, Jessica, and my college crush, Liam Carter, were my closest allies, or so I thought. Liam had always been protective, always attentive. I shared my dreams, fears, and personal secrets with him, believing he would never betray me. Jessica was like a sister. She was with me through thick and thin. But behind my back, they were plotting something I could never imagine. The first warning came subtly. Rumors about me began circulating on campus. People I had considered friends started avoiding me, whispering when I walked by. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but then I overheard a conversation that shattered my world. I was walking past the student lounge when I heard Liam's voice. "Did you see her? She thinks everyone loves her. Let's make sure she regrets trusting us." And Jessica laughed. "Don't worry, everything's set. By next week, no one will take her seriously." My heart stopped. My hands trembled. Every secret I had shared, every confidence I had trusted them with, was being weaponized against me. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was professional, social, and personal. That night, I sat alone in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory. How could the two people I trusted most hurt me this deeply? How could they be so cruel? And most importantly, why? The next day, things escalated. Liam called me, his voice calm but chilling. "Sara, if you don't follow our plan, everything you've worked for will be ruined. Your grades, your reputation, your future. Make one wrong move and it's over." Shock, disbelief, and rage coursed through me. I realized I was completely alone. The life I had built, the trust I had placed in others, had been ripped away in one devastating moment. But as my heart ached, a small flame of determination sparked inside me. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. They had no idea that the girl they betrayed was about to rise in a way they could never imagine. I spent the next days quietly observing them. Every detail mattered. Liam's arrogance, Jessica's overconfidence, the way they flaunted my secrets in subtle ways. I took notes, mentally marking each weakness. I wasn't going to confront them recklessly. That would be too obvious. I would wait. I would plan. And when the time came, they would regret underestimating me. Revenge, I realized, isn't about immediate retaliation. It's about patience. It's about precision. And I was ready to become patient, precise, and dangerous. That night, as I stared out the window at the city lights, I whispered to myself, "Sara Smith, you've been underestimated, but no more. This isn't over, it's only the beginning." And with that, my journey began, not as the naive, trusting girl everyone knew, but as a strategist, a planner, a woman on a mission to reclaim her dignity and exact justice. Little did Liam and Jessica know, the person they had betrayed was no longer the same girl. I had changed, and the storm I was about to unleash would leave them questioning every decision, every betrayal, every laugh they had shared at my expense. The countdown had begun, and revenge was coming. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I would disappear into embarrassment and silence. Instead, I folded that humiliation into something colder, a plan. First, I stopped reacting. Anger is loud and obvious. It tells people what you'll do next. Silence is a weapon. I went back to school, smiled at people who'd shunned me, and let them think their whispers had won. All the while I collected pieces of my life like evidence, not because I wanted to hurt them for the joy of it, but because I wanted justice. If they had used my words against me, I would use facts against them. Step 1 was clarity. I made a list. Names, dates, conversations, moments when Liam and Jessica had twisted my trust into ammunition. I remembered details I'd never meant to share publicly. My application notes for scholarships, private texts about internships, arguments I'd had with professors that they'd turned into gossip. I started combing through my own messages and screenshots, salvaging anything that confirmed what I remembered. Memories alone don't hold up. Documentation does. Step 2 was allies. I was determined not to become a lone avenger. I reached out quietly to people who still owed me the truth. An old professor, Dr. Alvarez, who had respected my work and once confided that he believed in fairness more than politics. An investigative blogger, Naomi, who had a reputation for unearthing lies without drama. And a quiet, tech-savvy cousin, Alex, who worked in compliance at a mid-sized PR company and knew where to find the public records and filings that people like Liam and Jessica assumed. No one would check. I didn't ask for permission. I asked for faith. I told them what I had, the timeline, the people involved, the consequences I'd already suffered, and they agreed to help. Not because they loved me, but because they hated injustice. While they dug, I did my own reconnaissance. I attended the places where Liam and Jessica felt safe. The coffee shop where Liam mans his weekend tutoring, the boutique Jessica used to host networking nights. I listened. I watched how they performed in public, how they laughed when they thought no one was listening. You learn more from the small things, the way Liam's eyes narrowed when someone mentioned advancement at his job, how Jessica flinched when the conversation turned to loyalty. Those tiny tells revealed the pressure points. Then I began to shape the narrative. Revenge in stories is often brute force, a dramatic confrontation, a reveal that roars like thunder. Real life is quieter. You build ladders, you remove the rungs, and you wait for people to step. My goal wasn't to break them. It was to expose them in a way that made their own choices undeniable. I used their arrogance against them. Liam had built his image around mentorship and trust. He tutored underclassmen and claimed impeccable ethics. Jessica sold herself as a connector, someone who could make things happen for your career. Those were handles I could pull. If their professional lives could be linked convincingly to their personal betrayal, their hypocrisy would become visible to everyone who had believed in them. Naomi, the blogger, found the first thread, a pattern of coordinated posts and anonymous emails that had started the rumor, milled during my final semester. Not the worst thing, just whisper campaigns, but traced back to an IP range affiliated with a vanity PR service that Jessica had once used for a staged influencer push. It was circumstantial, but it was a start. Dr. Alvarez gave me something better. He remembered a recommendation letter I had written for a joint research fellowship, one that had been quietly withdrawn after Liam advised the committee that I was unreliable. He still had a copy in his files, with my application materials and dates that contradicted the narrative Liam had fed the faculty. The paperwork alone wouldn't topple them, but it would bend a few opinions. Alex, who hated injustice with the kind of quiet fury I recognized, pulled parking logs and RSVP lists from events Jessica bragged about. He uncovered a pay-to-play invoice from a small PR agency showing Jessica's networking night had been partially funded by the same firm Naomi had traced, and that the firm's director had a personal connection to Liam's part-time tutoring client base. It began to stitch together. Rumor mill, staged events, and a pattern of deliberate reputation manipulation. We had to be careful. Accusations without context become rumors. I refused to be that kind of avenger. I collected dates. I asked for witness statements. A late-night call archived by a mutual friend that recorded Liam's voice making veiled threats. A screenshot from a former intern who'd been asked to seed. A story about me in a local paper in exchange for a recommendation. People are more honest when they think no one else is listening. They told me what they feared. With threads in hand, I designed the sting. Not a violent trap. I'm not a character in a pulp novel, but a staged unraveling. I started by quietly re-establishing my presence at the university alumni board. I volunteered at review panels, sent polite emails to faculty I'd once impressed, and submitted op-eds about ethics in mentorship that were careful, measured, and full of references to public records. No accusations, just questions. The goal was to rebuild credibility, so when the evidence came, I'd be seen as a frustrated student seeking truth, not a vengeful ex. Liam and Jessica predictably accelerated. Overconfidence breeds sloppiness. They grew louder, public even. Jessica posted triumphant photos of her, networking night, and name-dropped connections on social media. Liam began accepting more tutor clients and bragging about saving troubled students. Their arrogance made them visible. And then the first real mistake. Jessica sent an ex-intern a smug message celebrating how easy it had been to redirect people's careers that semester. She didn't think the intern would save the message. The intern did. He sent it to Naomi 2 weeks later and asked quietly if someone could do something because he felt terrible. Naomi didn't just do something. She began to write. She drafted a careful piece that laid out facts, the timeline of events that coincided with the rumor campaign, the invoices from the PR firm, and quotes from sworn statements from people who had been asked to participate. The article was framed as an investigation, not a witch hunt, and it named no one, yet. It asked the questions that made people look twice. The piece hit the university listserv on a quiet Tuesday morning and rippled. Comments clustered. Old friends ask questions. I watched the threads multiply like a tide pulling at the sand around a buried object. But there's always a moment when the tide can turn against you. On the morning Naomi scheduled the article to go live, when I expected the slow, grinding exposure I'd planned, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was low, more amused than threatening. "You're getting close, Sarah," the caller said. "Be careful how far you dig." My stomach clenched. Someone knew what I was doing. Someone was watching the ladder I had been building. The neat, careful plan I had assembled suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards breathing in a storm. I had a decision to make: pull back and protect the evidence, or move forward and let the dominoes fall. I felt the old fear, the same one that had made me the victim once, clawing up my throat. But fear was no longer my language. I answered with calm I didn't feel. "Do what you must," I told the voice. "But I'm done hiding." They laughed and the line went up, palms sweating, heart pounding. The next move had to be flawless. I couldn't afford a misstep. I checked my messages. Naomi confirmed she'd published the preliminary report, but she'd held off naming names pending one final confirmation, a smoking gun document she'd asked me to source. And that's when I realized the thing I needed wasn't another email or a witness. It was something from Liam's own hand, a paper trail he believed he'd destroyed. I had to force a slip, a confession, anything that would let Naomi finish the story without being sued into silence. I closed my laptop, looked at the city through my window, and felt the cold precision of the plan settle inside me like armor. The game had escalated. They'd been warned. Now it was my turn to push. Outside, on a street 2 blocks away, someone laughed as they crossed the road. I imagined it was Jessica, or Liam. I imagined it because the idea steadied me. I steadied myself, because when you decide to pull justice from the dark, you have to be ready to walk through the shadows you create. I picked up my phone and typed one sentence to Naomi. "I have one more piece. Meet me tonight." Her reply came in 3 dots and then, "I'll be there." And somewhere in the hum of the city, someone flipped on a light that cast a longer shadow than it had before. I met Naomi in a dim corner of a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and old paper. She wore the same neutral expression she used when she was about to deliver bad news to the powerful, the look of someone who had decided long ago that truth mattered more than comfort. I slid into the booth, palms still slightly damp from the adrenaline that had been building since the mysterious phone call. "You have something?" she asked, voice low. I pulled a thin envelope from my coat and put it on the table like a lawyer, placing evidence before a jury. Naomi didn't open it right away. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then back into my eyes as if weighing whether she trusted my calm. "It's his handwriting," I said. "A draft he never sent. He thought he deleted it. He didn't." Naomi eased the paper out and read. Her face didn't change much, but her fingers tightened on the edge. The document was short, a frantic email. Liam had written to someone I didn't recognize, dated the night the rumors began to spread. In it, he admitted, in clipped sentences, that we need to discredit her, that Jessica will handle the narrative, and that he would make sure the committee pulls the recommendation. It was the kind of thing someone types late at night, angry and careless, the kind of thing that proves intent. "This is good," Naomi said finally. "It's direct. It connects Liam to the orchestration. We can use this, but it needs context. We need to prove he acted on it." I'd anticipated that. I handed Naomi a second item, a printed screenshot I'd been keeping secret, a message from Jessica to an intern, offering payment for planting a story. She swallowed as she read the intern's startled reply. That reply was the credibility I'd been sourcing, a conscience. However late, that had pushed a young person to tell the truth. Naomi placed the documents in an evidence folder, then looked at me with an expression I can only describe as brittle hope. "If I publish this and follow the trail, people will start asking hard questions," she said. "But you should be prepared. They will come after you. They'll sue, they'll threaten, they'll smear. Are you ready for that?" I nodded. I had rehearsed the answer 1,000 times in my head. "I'm done pretending I'm not," I said. They started it. We left with a plan. Naomi would publish a detailed piece the next morning outlining the timeline, quoting the documents without naming Liam or Jessica initially, just laying the facts out and asking the right questions. The goal was to create public pressure that would force the university and Jessica's PR partners to investigate. Naming names too early would give them legal avenues to silence us. Subtlety was still my ally. That night I went home and slept a little, the kind of sleep that comes in short fits between thoughts that won't stop replaying. I woke to a world that felt slightly off, the way a mirror looks when it's been walked past too quickly. My phone had dozens of missed calls and messages, friends checking in, strangers sending words of support, a few cruel notes from anonymous accounts that smelled of bile and fear. The first article hadn't even been published, and the echo had already started. Naomi's investigation hit the listserv, and then the student feeds like a ripple through glass. People who had only known the rumor began to question it. Comments that had once been cruel turned curious, then defensive, then indignant on my behalf. People dug up old posts and receipts. Truth has a way of collecting friends in the most unexpected places. Liam called me mid-afternoon. His voice was paper-thin, pretending calm. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said. "This is getting out of control." I let him speak while I watched his name climb on my phone, felt the tremor of satisfaction that came with control. "I'm listening," I said. He tried to maneuver me, offering vague apologies that tasted of insurance. He promised clarity, asked me to meet, to clear this up. But the tone was different now, cautious, like someone stepping around a trap. He asked me to do one thing that made my skin crawl, to handle this privately. I laughed then, a short, sharp sound. "You already handled it," I said. "Privately." I told him I was meeting with Naomi and that everything he had done would be laid out for people to read. I heard a flinch on the other end, something like a person realizing that the castle they built on sand had begun to sink. Jessica tried a different tactic. She posted a polished video on her account, smiling, talking about mentorship and community and the power of lifting others. Her comments filled with praise. It was performative and hollow, and people saw it for what it was, an attempt to drown the smell of rot with perfume. But the internet has a long memory. Screenshots of her messages, the invoices, the intern's reply. They were already circulating privately, then publicly. Her polished face couldn't scrub what was printed in black and white. With the pressure building, they made mistakes. Liam called a client and cursed, believing the conversation private. Someone recorded it. Jessica emailed a vendor with an attachment named Rumor Plan Final Docs. The vendor, disgusted, forwarded it to Naomi. Every careless move was a gift. Then came the escalation I hadn't planned. Someone started a whisper campaign about me again. But this time it wasn't the old rumors. This was different. Accusations that my campaign was a publicity stunt, that I had forged documents, that Naomi was a paid provocateur. It was small at first, a few posts that could be dismissed, but the origin traced back to a professional account associated with Liam's family business. The implication was clear: push back with power. I felt anger like a physical thing then, hot and focused. It was one thing to be wronged. It was another to have the wrongness twisted into a lie about your integrity. I had worked too hard, fought too quietly, and this smear felt personal in a way that cut deeper than the initial betrayal. I called Alex and asked him to dig through anything connected to Liam's family, not to attack, but to map influence. He found something small but telling: a donor list for an alumni fund that tied a business, partner of Liam's father to a PR firm that Jessica had used. The connections felt like veins under thin skin. Pull one and the map starts to reveal a pattern. That night, as I was drafting a response, with Naomi that carefully addressed the smear without appearing defensive, my doorbell rang. A late knock, 3 sharp taps. My heart did something strange, a double beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pulled the curtains aside and peered through the peephole. Outside stood someone I hadn't seen in months. Mara, a girl from my freshman year who'd left campus suddenly after a family emergency. Mara's face was pale and her eyes too bright. She tapped again. I opened the door just a crack. "Mara," I whispered. She pushed past me as if the threshold belonged to someone else, and then she hugged me with a force that hurt. "I had to see you," she said, breathless. I couldn't watch from the sidelines anymore. She pulled back and looked at me as if waiting for permission to speak. "I have something that will blow this wide open," she said. "But it's dangerous." My pulse kicked. I should have been wary. I had learned caution. But Mara's presence felt like fate, like a piece falling into place. She reached into her bag and handed me a tiny USB drive, wrapped with a scrap of tape and a label in a handwriting I didn't recognize. "What is it?" I asked, voice steady but brittle. "Proof," she said. "Audio. You'll want to listen with headphones." Before I could ask questions, the sound of a car door slamming echoed outside, sharp in the night. Someone was leaving, or arriving. Mara's eyes flicked toward the window and she paled. "We need to be careful," she whispered. "They're watching more than you think." The door clicked in the lock as if someone had turned the key from the other side of the street. The neighborhood hummed with distant life, indifferent. Inside, the folder Naomi and I had been building felt suddenly delicate, like a paper map that could be set ablaze by a single gust. I held the USB between my fingers and felt the weight of it. Small, unassuming, but heavier than it looked. Whatever was on it could end them. Or it could end me. I looked at Mara and then at the street, at the dark shapes moving beyond the porch light, and felt the old pattern return. The world was shrinking to the size of my choices. I had come too far to stop. The next move would have to be precise and ruthless in the way only truth can be. I sat at my kitchen table, headphones in, and pressed play. There are sounds that change the structure of a life. The click of a lock you didn't know was there. The scrape of a chair, a whispered plan. The recording began with laughter, easy and familiar. And then a voice I had once trusted spoke my name in a way that dissolved the last of my illusions. "Make sure she doesn't get the fellowship. Pull the recommendation. If we destroy her now, no one will believe her later." It was Liam's voice, steady and chilling. Then Jessica, laughing, adding, "We'll make sure she's the joke." Nobody hires a joke. The audio was raw. It was intimate. And it was unmistakable. As the voices looped in my ears, my hands stopped shaking. Something centered inside me, not calm, Not yet, but sure. The evidence was no longer a paper trail. It was breath, tones, intentions captured in a moment of arrogance. A confession that couldn't be easily denied. I sat up straighter, feeling a cold clarity. The net was closing. They could see it now. Or they would once. Naomi aired the recording with the other documents. But the presence outside my door reminded me that they were not idle. They were fighting back, and they had influence. I clicked off the audio and looked at Mara. She was watching me expectantly. "Are you ready?" she asked. I stood, the room suddenly too small for the story that was unfolding. "Yes," I said. "But from now on we play differently. They started a war. I'll finish it." Outside, a car passed slowly, as if making a show of being ordinary. Inside, the USB sat on the table like a loaded promise. The morning Naomi published the piece, the world tipped on its axis. She led with facts, the email draft, the intern's screenshot, the invoice trail. And then, when the tide of public attention had already started to swell, she released the audio. The recording played like a verdict. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just cold, incontrovertible evidence of intent. It wasn't a shout. It was a slow, undeniable collapse. Within hours, the university's inbox flooded. Professors I had once admired sent private messages, apologizing for not having asked harder questions. Old classmates posted tentative messages. "I'm sorry I listened to rumors." Local press picked up. Naomi's thread and then the regional outlets. And suddenly the whispers that had once defined me flipped into something else. Outrage. On the surface, my parents kept quiet. My mother called once, a trembling message. "Sarah, are you okay?" "We saw the posts." My father didn't call. Thomas had always been careful with his public image, a man who managed reputations the way others manage finances. For a long moment, I felt the old fear, the sense that family loyalty would be the one shield left to me. Then, increasingly, that fear turned hot. What if family was part of the calculus that had let this happen? The university issued a statement. An independent inquiry. Immediate suspension of any staff implicated in failing to examine complaints. And a promise to protect student welfare. It sounded formal and distant. A legal dance designed to show motion without committing to consequences. But the board convened and, under pressure from donors and alumni stirring online, asked for fast actions. Liam was suspended from his tutoring program. Jessica's networking partners began to distance themselves. Vendors who'd quietly sent invoices started to call Naomi back with clarifications, their earlier attachments suddenly looking like liability. People who had benefits to lose quickly chose to forget how closely they'd once hugged. Jessica in selfies and sponsorship posts. They fought back. Predictably, it began with legal threats aimed at Naomi and at me. Liability, defamation, demands to take down the story. Naomi, steady and fierce, replied with the documents and time-stamped evidence. The law likes proof, and we had it. The threats became a chorus. Anonymous calls, menacing voicemails, the kind of crude intimidation that smells faintly of panic. But the most painful blow came from inside my house. My father called me into his study that night. The room smelled of old books and the faint iron scent of his cologne. He sat behind his desk like a man who had been learned to measure risk his entire life. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, practiced. "Sarah," he said, "we need to talk about everything." I sat across from him, the image of our family dinners in my head, the laughter, the toasts, the soft insistence that nothing could break us. His next words were like a blade. "There are things you don't understand about reputation," he said. "Business is fragile. People call on favors. Sometimes decisions are made that aren't ideal. We protect ourselves because we must." I felt the floor shift. "Are you saying you knew?" I asked, each word a rock in my mouth. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. Instead, he spoke of nuance, of pressure from partners, of the cost of scandal. He spoke in circles until the truth looked like a rumor in itself. In the end, there was a pause, and then an admission so soft I almost missed it. We did what we thought we had to, for the company, for our family. That hit harder than any smear or rumor. It was the modern betrayal. Not a dramatic confession, but a clinical, economical choice. A decision to prioritize image over a daughter's dignity. My mother wept in quiet denial in the next room. My father, the man who had taught me to stand tall, had chosen to shelter the family name rather than stand with me. The next day, a story surfaced on a financial blog, a leaked memo linking my father's firm to one of the alumni donors who'd quietly backed Jessica's events. The implication was explosive. What if this had never been about college drama, but about influence? The narrative shifted. Suddenly, the betrayal had roots that ran deeper than petty cruelty. It had been engineered by people who knew how to manipulate systems until they were exposed. Liam and Jessica responded publicly in different ways. Liam posted a short statement on a student forum that read like a legal consultant's draft, contrition worded as ambiguity, apologies wrapped in passive voice. I am dismayed by the pain this has caused, it said. He left out the details that mattered. Jessica released a glossy video, tearful and contrite, promising community work and sensitivity training. It was performative sorrow. Enough for some, not enough for others. The court of public opinion, however, did not rest on performative acts alone. Alumni who'd been quietly hurt by the duo came forward. An old friend of Jessica's published emails showing how the PR firm instructed messaging to control the narrative. Professor released dates and notes proving the timeline Naomi had built. Each reveal was a small shove toward institutional accountability. As the net tightened, their desperation grew messy. Liam was seen arguing on campus, in a tone that once would have been private, but was now overheard and posted. Jessica's sponsors quietly cut ties. The vendors who had been complicit testified in interviews that they hadn't appreciated the wider consequences of their participation. The stain spread, and with each attempt to scrub it, more dirt. I should have felt victorious. Instead, the victory tasted like ash. The headlines were satisfying, but the consequences were complex. Some friends returned. Others stayed away. My family dinners were fractured. My father's business faced scrutiny from partners and investors. The man who had always told me to think before I acted now faced the fallout of decisions he had thought were necessary. There was also a creeping fear. What had started as a private betrayal now involved people with power and money, entities that could cause real harm beyond reputations. The legal threats intensified. Anonymous packages arrived at Naomi's office. My email was flooded with hacked-looking messages implying more dirt if I continued. Someone tried to break into my car one night and left a thin, threatening note on the windshield. Stop. But even in the face of threats, a surprising thing happened. Truth breeds alliances. Students who had been ostracized for speaking up found new courage. An alumni group organized a small fundraiser for free legal advice for whistleblowers. A campus counselor reached out to offer support. People who had once been passive began to act. And then came the final twist of the day, one that put everything into sharper perspective. An investigative local journalist contacted me with an old yearbook photo showing a different version of events. An image of Jessica and a man, a donor, at a fundraiser the year before, standing close with a plaque acknowledging a generous contribution. The plaque bore my father's firm's name. It was the kind of small, visual thing that made connections obvious in ways documents sometimes fail to do. The photo was a public snapshot of proximity. The evidence suggested that influence had been at play long before the rumor campaign had started. When I confronted my father with the photo, he didn't deny it. He sighed and looked smaller than his tailored suits ever let him seem. We were involved, he admitted. Not in the way you think. We were in a difficult position. There were expectations. Another word chosen carefully to soften the weight of what had been done. That night, alone in my room, I felt more divided than ever. The revenge I had envisioned as a clean arc, betrayal, exposure, justice, and had become a messy, Layered fight that involved loves, loyalties, and legacies. I had wanted them to feel pain. Instead, I found myself wondering aloud what justice would even look like now. Would it mean destroying the people who hurt me? Would it mean taking down the structures that permitted them? Would it mean stepping into public life and dismantling reputations piece by piece? The answer didn't come easily. But one thing did become clear. This was no longer just about Liam and Jessica. It reached into the fabric of decisions older than me, into the compromises adults made to protect incomes, legacies. As midnight edged toward 1 a.m, my phone buzzed. A private message from an unknown number lit the screen. "We can end this quietly. Your father has options." It was the same thin threat, different guise, an offer disguised as leverage. I stared at those words for a long time. The lines between ally and adversary, between revenge and survival, blurred. I typed a single reply, fingers steady. No more deals. I hit send and felt the small, heavy weight of choice. The next morning would bring hearings, statements, and perhaps legal battles. It would bring consequences not just for Liam and Jessica, but for my family, for my future, for how the world would define me. And somewhere in the city, behind closed doors, decisions were being made that would push this story toward its final act. The sun rose over the city like it did every day, indifferent to the chaos that had unfolded in the shadows. I sat by my window, coffee in hand, staring at the street below. The air felt electric, not because of weather, but because everything I had planned, every careful move was converging. Today would decide who I was, and who Liam and Jessica would become in the eyes of everyone who had watched silently until now. Naomi had prepared the final piece for publication. It was exhaustive: emails, invoices, recordings, witness statements, and the yearbook photo. She named no names initially, but the connections were unmistakable. Within hours, the university, local press, alumni boards, and even some national outlets had started questioning the conduct of Liam, Jessica, and the enablers around them. The net had tightened. Liam called me, his voice trembling, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. "Sara, please," he said. "Let's talk before this blows up completely." I listened patiently. There was no remorse, only the thin sheen of self-preservation. I realized then that remorse wasn't part of the equation. For some, power and ego always outweigh ethics. "I've said everything I needed to," I replied calmly. "Now the world will do the talking." Jessica, desperate, tried to manipulate the narrative through social media, posting images of herself at charity events, crying in staged videos, pleading for understanding. But every post was undermined by evidence, already circulating, screenshots of her messages, invoices from the PR firm, and the audio that captured her own admission of manipulation. She had built a persona based on influence and charm. I had torn it down with truth and timing. The university held hearings. Liam faced disciplinary action. Jessica was barred from holding positions in student organizations for the rest of the year. The PR vendors who had unknowingly contributed to the smear were publicly reprimanded, and some quietly severed ties. Even my father faced scrutiny for his indirect involvement. Decisions made for family. Business had consequences. But the real victory wasn't in punishments. It was in exposure. The people who had underestimated me, who had believed I would crumble in silence, were now revealed in their true forms: arrogant, manipulative, and vulnerable to scrutiny. I didn't feel gloating satisfaction. Revenge had been about reclaiming control, not enjoying suffering. I had learned a lesson that power is not always about force. Sometimes it's about patience, observation, and careful strategy. I had become someone I didn't recognize at first. Stronger, sharper, unafraid to confront deception head-on. A week later, I walked across campus for the first time since the rumors began. Heads turned, not with sneers or whispers, but with acknowledgement and quiet respect. The people who had once doubted me now looked at me differently, and some offered apologies without expecting forgiveness. I passed Liam and Jessica one afternoon. Their eyes avoided mine. Liam's posture was stiff, Jessica's smile forced. The weight of exposure had humbled them in ways subtle but undeniable. No confrontation was needed. The evidence had done the talking. In the quiet of my apartment that night, I reflected on the journey. Betrayal had shattered my trust. But revenge, and calculated, precise, and ethical in its execution, had restored my agency. I had faced deception, manipulation, and threats, yet emerged intact, tempered by experience. I realized something else. Revenge isn't just about the past. It's about setting boundaries, reclaiming dignity, and ensuring that those who hurt you cannot do so again. Liam and Jessica would carry the consequences, but I carried the lesson. I poured myself a glass of wine. The city lights twinkling below, and allowed a small smile. The storm had passed, but I was no longer the same person who had once trembled at whispers and rumors. I was Sara Smith, 25, and unbroken. And for the first time in months,